If you've been following along with our Green Coffee series, today we're going to be talking about the SCA cupping form. So stay tuned and find out. Hey everyone, I'm Jay and we are here today talking about how to understand the Specialty Coffee Association's cupping sheet. This is the cupping form that pretty much if you're involved in tasting coffee critically, you will probably run into this at some point in your time and career. It was developed by the Specialty Coffee Association to differentiate coffees from commercial. While we do use a scale that's technically of 0 to 100, really the cupping form focuses on coffees that are graded 70 points and above. Before we actually get into cupping and scoring, I think we should have a base understanding of how to use the form and what each section is really about. So let's get into it. As you can see on this particular sheet, there are 3 sets of grading sections, and basically they are all identical. This just allows you to do 3 samples per page. And then there's also a key up here, and the key reads, there we go. So the key is the quality scale, and it runs from 6, 7, 8, 9, and then at 0.25 intervals in between. So 6.6, 6.25, 6.5, 6.75, 7, and then so on and so forth. So good, very good, excellent is 8, outstanding is 9. Let's get down into it. So it is actually divided into several different sections. As you can see here, there is sample number. And so most of the times when you're dealing with coffee cupping, you're going to find that the samples are unidentified. Really what we want to do is we want to try to limit the amount of preconceived notions so that it doesn't really affect your score, or more importantly, it doesn't influence your score. So a sample number, so that can be anything that you want it to be, or whatever the cupping session is using that day. The next section is roast level of sample. And as you can see, it's a graduated scale that starts really, really dark to really, really light. It's really just a matter of putting a simple pencil mark or line through whatever color that you believe that it is. So when you start out, you're going to start out with a sample of coffee in a cup. And you're just basically going to look at the sample and see, okay, well, how dark, how light is it? And you'll just choose a corresponding position on that roast intensity. The next section is what's called fragrance aroma. This is kind of a 2-part scoring area where you're going to smell the fragrance of the coffee as it's dry. So once the coffee's been ground, it's going to be placed in the cup, and then you're going to smell it. Depending on where you are and who you're cupping with, the protocols may change. Standard protocol today is you don't touch standard protocol before COVID was that you don't touch the cup. Now, you'll just smell the fragrance in the cup. Once the hot water's been added, you can smell again and get the idea of the aroma. So you're actually going to take, in total, ideally you're going to have 2 different inhalations of the fragrance and the aroma. The fragrance when it's dry, the aroma when the coffee's wet. As you can see on here, you'll see an intensity scale for dry. So basically it's just really kind of how intense is it? Low intensity, high intensity. There's also a room for qualities. If there's any particular qualities that you're noting and you want to make a note about that, you can put that there. The break, when you do the break, you can record the intensity of the aroma during the break. It is a limited amount of space, so there is a space for notes beneath it. So there's plenty of space for you to use. And then a lot of times if I get a lot of notes, I'll actually write around it, outside the boxes. So as you can see, for fragrance aroma, as well as a lot of the other categories, you're going to see a score indication running horizontally across the box at the very top. It goes from 6 to 10. Basically, how this works is that you're going to make a qualitative decision based on your experience as to the quality of the fragrance and aroma. I think the best way to think about it is, very good, excellent, outstanding. It's one of those things where a lot of times we have cupping situations where people will want to be what we call calibrated. You'll sit around with other cuppers and talk about your scores and be like, well, I think this is a 7.5. And then you'll talk to other cuppers that have experience and they're like, well, yeah, I think it's maybe 7.75. I think it might be 8.25. And you kind of get a feel for it over time, what a particular characteristic and the qualitative score for that. However, if you're all by yourself and you're just starting out, whatever you think works. Let's try it. If you've been following along and have actually ordered the same coffee and roasted it yourself, we're going to taste it together, and then I'm going to tell you what I think. And then you can kind of get a feel like, do you agree? Do you not agree? Do you see what I'm talking about? If not, whatever. And basically, that's the gist of calibration. All right, so let's move on. Next is flavor. So as you're tasting the coffee, you're going to give it a flavor score. You know, qualitatively, how is the flavor? Good, very good, excellent. Then there's the aftertaste. The aftertaste is basically, how does that flavor of the coffee linger on your palate? Does it linger well? Does it linger long? Is it quick? Is it fleeting? Is it just not pleasant? Is it bitter? You know, these are things that you'll think about, give a qualitative score for. Next up is acidity. Acidity, again, has an intensity scale from low to high. So as you're tasting the coffee and you think about your acidity, you can think about the intensity of it. How intense is it? Maybe it's not so intense. Maybe it's pretty low. Just because the intensity is high or low doesn't necessarily mean that the score should be impacted in a particular way. Meaning that if you have a high intensity of acidity, that may qualitatively not be very good. Conversely, you could have a low acidity in a coffee, and qualitatively it could be fantastic. So you want to score appropriately, and try not to let yourself be too influenced by, oh, the intensity is high, so therefore it must be 8.5 or whatever. All right, sweetness now. Sweetness is less of a character of sugary sweetness rather than just a general sweetness. Now, what does that mean? You know, a lot of people say, oh, well, coffee's bitter, coffee's this, coffee's that. There can be inherent sweetness in the coffee. As you're tasting greater amounts of coffee and a wider spectrum of coffee, I think you'll come across more of that natural sweetness that isn't sugary sweet necessarily. It just has a nice sweetness on the palate. Again, there it goes with intensity, high, low. And then, like in the acidity section, presence of high or low sweetness does not necessarily indicate a particular preference on the score or the qualitative score. All right, next up is body. Body is how round is it on your palate? How full does it feel on your palate? Does it have some weightiness to it? If it does, is it a positive thing? Is it a negative thing? Like, you can have body in a coffee that may be dirty, and that dirtiness is actually kind of a negative. So it's a matter of tasting again, and in many respects, it's really all of this and pretty much everything is kind of a response to your personal preferences, and also your preferences that are based on your personal experience, right? And when I say that, you know, you might be saying, oh, well, you know, you've been doing it for a long time. It's true, I've been doing this a long time. And my ability to taste and score has been greatly influenced by my experience personally, you know. Not just what I prefer to drink myself, but more what I've experienced at cupping tables across the world. So I may have a particular preference for a particular style of coffee, but I've learned over the years to be able to identify coffees that are not necessarily to my personal preference, but are also of great quality, and be able to accurately assess those. And that's kind of what you're working towards, both whether you're a professional or just a consumer. You know, if you're someone that wants to drink nice coffee at home, it takes time to develop that palate and that understanding of what you like, what you find to be quality. So yeah, you know, if you have questions, just drop those in the comments. You know, if you think I'm crazy, put those in the comments too, and I'll read through them and I'll tell you you're crazy. All right, so next up is balance. Now, balance is basically when you're tasting the coffee, the balance is, well, how balanced is it? You know, if it's, you know, you can have bitter notes and sweet notes, and you can have fruitiness and maybe brightness, and you know, how well balanced does that all come to play? Is the coffee, as you're tasting it, weighted too far one way or the other? That's something I think you can kind of feel as you're tasting. Oh, it's not really balanced. Of course, the greater the balance, the more harmonious. Think about how harmonious is the coffee. Maybe that's the balance that you're looking for. The next two categories are clean cup and uniformity. As you notice, there are 5 boxes in each of those. This one is a relatively easy one to score. There are 5 boxes because in a typical critical cupping, you will have 5 samples of the same coffee. And for clean cup and uniformity, what we are looking for across those 5 samples, are they all the same? So in each cup, are they clean? Or does one of the cups have a taint, an off flavor, something like kind of just nasty that the rest do not share? If that's the case, then we will mark in the box that this particular sample is not clean, or this particular sample is not uniform. That's really what it means, and it's a really simple one to do. Most of the times when you have nice coffee that doesn't have any defects, those will be technical perfect scores, you know, 10s for both categories. Sweetness has changed from a qualitative score to simply a presence score, right? If you find ununiform sweetness in the 5 samples, then you will mark that sample as out of sync. The next and very last the next section is the overall score. So basically you're going to make a score that's informed by everything that you've experienced and all your previous scores, and give it an overall score. It's not necessarily average of what you've done, but rather a score that's been informed by your score. So for example, let's say across the board you gave a lot of 7.5s, 7.5s, maybe an 8 to one of the categories. If you would say an overall score of 8.5, it could be, but it's not necessarily informed by it. So you kind of will wonder, like, well, if you had all these 8 or below scores throughout your experience, does it really make sense that your overall score is 8.5? Well, that's something for you to defend. So if you're enjoying this video, be sure to check out all of our other content here on the Spro Coffee channel, as well as on my personal channel called Ono Coffee. We've got a lot of great videos coming up. We've released what I hope you think is a lot of great videos. And we also have coffee for sale, so buy coffee, sprocoffee.com on basis, so you can order, get 10% off, as well as get every other week, every third week, once a month if you want. However much you want, let us know. Happy to send it to you, of course. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments. If you hate the video, love the video, want to see other videos, just drop those down there. I read them all, and I won't be hurt. So in this last section that is about defects, you'll see that it says defects, and then in parentheses it says subtract, as well as taint equals 2, false equals 4. Then you have number of cups times intensity equals a final score. To be honest with you, this is something that I've never really used. In the 18 years that I've been in the coffee business, never have I used this. Basically, in the times that we've had taints, basically we just kind of like, let's say if there was a sample of 5, we'd find this taint, we would put it outside the box so that everyone would know that, let's say there's a phenol flavor in it, and just continued on. I mean, to be honest, I really didn't know what it was. So I had to reach out to some friends in the industry that are much more knowledgeable than me. I reached out to Todd Arnette from the Academy of Coffee Excellence at Williamsburg. Todd's really a great guy. He's been doing a lot of SCA courses. He's a Q grader. He's a Q instructor. He teaches all kinds of great courses. If you would like to have in-person classes down in Williamsburg, you can go see Todd. He's got a great program and a great facility down there, as well as, you can do the whole Colonial Williamsburg thing when you're finished. What Todd says is that section is for penalizing the severity of the defect. The box that says number of cups must correspond to the number of cups marked off in the clean cup box as defective. The severity is a taint, perceptible on each slurping pass, or objectionable, overwhelming the cup so that you cannot taste the coffee. Which was great, but I didn't really understand how do you do the points. So Todd writes again, here is one set of examples. A mild level of ferment defect in cup 3, I would mark uniformity box 3 times and score 8. Clean cup box 3 to X and score 8. Clean cup box 3 knocks it out and score an 8. Sweetness would be a 10 because cup 3 is overtly fruity, but I can still taste the coffee. So let's say that the total score is 82, which would have been 86 without the defect. I will also deduct 1, the number of defective cups, times -2, the severity of the defect that is deemed to be a taint, perceptible throughout but not overwhelming. The final score would be 80. He continues on with a different example. Same exercise, but now mold. Uniformity 8, clean cup 8, sweetness 8. I can only taste mold and not even coffee. So in the sweetness cup, that mold is really just taken over. Total score is 80. Now for determining final score, the defect is deemed to be a fault, so -4 equals 76. Does that make sense? I hope that does. It took me a couple times to read to make sure that I understood it, but thanks a lot, Todd. Really appreciate it. Once you this, if you have these taints or faults, then you'll calculate that and then subtract that from the total score. The total score is basically once you've given all your scores, you total them up. And like I said earlier, with the clean cup, the sweetness, and the uniformity, those with the 5 boxes, each of those boxes is worth 2 points. So if you have one defect, you lose 2 points, 8 points. If there's no off ones, then you give it the full 10 points. So after you've scored everything and you have your final score, now it's time to determine, well, how great is that coffee that you're tasting? Anything that's 80 or below is what we consider below specialty. 80 and below is not specialty. 80 to 84.99 is considered very good. 85 to 89.99 is considered excellent. And then 90 and above is considered outstanding. So everything from 80 and above is considered specialty. You know, but how great is a coffee? You know, you see a lot of people talk about 90 plus coffees. You know, really, to be honest with you, there's a lot of great coffees in the 80 to 84 category. There's a lot of misconception amongst certain people that anything that's below 85 is terrible or not worth your time or not worth paying for. I think that's a misnomer, and I think it's a bit of a wrong thinking. You know, it's like, I think coffees that are in the 80 to 85 category can be wonderful, wonderful coffees that people really respond well to, people really enjoy. A lot of the ones people are shooting for, you hear about these coffees that are really, really expensive, you know, and they're kind of like they're the anomaly, really. You know, they're the ones that are really getting hyped up. Are they necessarily coffees that you will find to be very, like, enriching and enjoyable? Maybe, but also maybe not. So don't get too worked up in the score. What you're looking for is really nice quality coffee that you can enjoy, or if you're a professional, really nice coffee that your customers can enjoy. You know, when I'm tasting coffees, you know, I'm looking for coffees that kind of fit what we're trying to do here at Spro. Basically, we do want to have really exquisite coffees that are really, really amazing, but we also need to have coffees that are just really great to become maybe not always single origin coffees, but also coffees that can go into our house blend, that can be part of our different blends, they can be part of our, let's say, our night watch program. So a coffee that can take a little bit darker roasting, or an espresso, coffees that we can use to blend to create a sum that's greater than the individual parts. It's not really always about like the highest score, and I know a lot of people really get stuck in that. So try not to get too wrapped up in like, oh, I need a coffee that's 90 plus. Yeah. If you're looking for more technical details, the Specialty Coffee Association has their specialty coffee cupping protocol, and you can get that as a free download from the SCA website. I'll put the link in the description below for you, and that'll give you a more written program as to how to conduct the cupping and some of the procedures to take. Now, they have changed a lot of the cupping standards because of COVID. They've actually changed it so that it's less contact. Like, you know, one of the things that people really freak out about, even before COVID, was, especially non-industry types, is that when you're in a group of cuppers, you're actually sharing the same cup. And so now, especially with COVID, the SCA is changing the protocols around it. We'll cover that in a future video. So that's pretty much every detail on the cupping form that you need to know. As I'm sitting here editing this video, I realize we're already reaching 20 minutes, and I think that's a long time for any one video. So I'm going to break this cup into 2 separate videos. This first part here, just about the cupping sheet, and then the next one is going to be a shorter video that's just going to cover how to cup, what kind of protocols we're using, and then eventually after that we're going to get to the actual cupping of this coffee and the Termico. So I'm looking forward for you guys to seeing that. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.